wherever you are and whenever you are. Welcome, good souls, to the planet. This is Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway and paranormal portal and tantalizing turnoffs. Joining me tonight for our last episode of 2020, I'm honored to say are a roundtable of KGRA guests, including Tiffany Mac, Peter Robbins, Martin Willis, Kevin Hale, and later in the night, Lee Speigel will be joining us as well. And they are all here to discuss the year 2020 in ufology, a retrospect, if you will. And man, what a year it has been. But even for ufology, it has been a pretty big year. Haim Eshed, former Israeli space security chief, claims extraterrestrials exist and are part of a galactic federation. On August 4th, U.S. Department of Defense announced the establishment of Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, UAPTF. 3 UAP videos, which were released by To the Stars Academy in 2017, were officially released by the Navy, having already confirmed their validity. And there's so much more to come in the night, and everything is on the table for this round table. But to get us started, for many of you, you are familiar with the bumper music every week. And in the past, I guess, month and a half, 2 months, we've brought Lizette Xavier on to provide our bumper music. So I'm extremely grateful to Lizette. So Lizette, welcome to Paranormal Now. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So you chatted with me and you shared that you wrote a holiday season song specifically for 2020.
Yeah, I accidentally wrote a Christmas song, and it's been good.
You accidentally wrote one?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right, fair enough. So we're going to play that song now. I want everyone to take a listen. It's a really, really beautiful piece. And then later in the show, when we come back from the second break, you'll hear Lizette's bumper music as well, in addition to Septembrio's bumper music, which you see every week. So let's get this screen share going.
Chocolate's almost gone, just a few sleeps away. Nothing else feels familiar these days. No snow on the ground, no Santa at the mall. The mistletoe hanging from the shop wall. Are we really sure? Really sure? Are we really sure that it's almost Christmas? Usually by now I'd have lights on my tree, but life's been really hard, so I've ignored some things. Usually I'd have my secrets and I picked all my friends would squish into my tiny apartment. Are we really sure? Really sure? Are we really sure that it's almost Christmas? Cause if there's one thing this year has taught me, it's sometimes the truth is ugly, and there are days when I just wanna quit. But that same pain, it has a way to make me fall back in love with all the things I didn't know I needed. So it doesn't feel like Christmas, but that's my Christmas way. For the first time in our lives, made snow globes with little jars, and toys lying around and eggs from the yard. We ginger house from scratch and I didn't break. Bonfires at the park, it's s'mores until we ate. Gotta make the most, gotta make the most of this Christmas. Cause if there's one thing this year has taught me, sometimes the truth is ugly, and there are days when I just wanna quit. But that same pain, it has a way to make me fall back in love with all the things I didn't know I needed. So it doesn't feel like Christmas, but that's my Christmas way. So thank you for all the times this year it was hard to breathe. Help me see the distractions in my life, and what I need is a little thing. It's a little thing. It's checking in on grandma to ask about her day, running into friends, seeing a smiling face, dressing up for Christmas parties every day, and sharing a cab without a worry. It's hard. I never thought I'd miss her. But if there's one thing this year has taught me, it's sometimes the truth is ugly, and there are days when I just want to quit. But that same pain, it has a way that makes me fall back in love with things I didn't know I'd next. It doesn't feel like Christmas, but that's my Christmas wish.
Hey, Coco, come here.
That was beautiful, Lizette. Absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
So, what inspired you besides obviously the obvious? What got you going with this?
You know what? I want to say that it was like this big intentional thing, but it wasn't. I was just feeling really sad. And, you know, I think sometimes I think all of us can relate to just like pushing through this really bizarre year and just like doing what needs to be done and making all of the sacrifices we need to make. And I think I was just like taking a minute to just feel sorry for myself a little bit. I was just like feeling a little sad. I realized I wasn't going to see my dad on Christmas. And so I just went to my piano to feel better. And I didn't even think I was going to write anything. I just thought I'd play.
Yeah.
And then like, I think 30 minutes later, the song was just done. And I was like, oh, okay, well, neat. And then the day after that, I recorded it. And then I put a call out to just see if anyone wanted to send videos, to see if I could put something together. And then the video that we just shared came together in about 3 days.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Lizette.
That was really
Yeah,
nice.
thanks for having me.
And I look forward to hearing your music every week on Paranormal Now during the bumper breaks in 2020. So thank you. And please tell Michael and the whole family, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, same to all of you. Take care.
Okay. Good night, Lizette.
Thank you. Great.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. If you want to find out more about Lizette, go to lizettexavier.com. All right. This is the Ufology panel of 2020. I have Martin Willis, Kevin Hale, Peter Robbins, and Tiffany Mac, and myself, of course. And joining us in just a little bit is Lee Speigel. So it's going to be interesting where this takes us tonight. But there's so much to cover and so many great voices here with us. Martin Willis is the host of podcast UFO on KGRA. The UFO subject has fascinated Martin Willis since his youth. Yet, he was on the fence about the subject. He experienced a personal sighting in 2006 in Carmel Valley, California, that solidified his beliefs that unidentified flying objects do exist. Since this time, Martin has paid attention to what others have to say about the phenomena with an open mind as a UFO enthusiast. He created Podcast UFO in November of 2011. Kevin Hale and Tiffany Mac are the hosts of Universal Secrets on KGRA DB Radio. Tiffany Mac obtained her degree in broadcast journalism from the University of Kentucky, Lexington in 2000, in addition to working as a producer with periodic co-hosting appearances on the Gralien Report podcast beginning in 2016. Tiffany worked as a weekly co-host on Shooting from the Lip, the KT Unearthly show with host Kevin Hale. She has traveled extensively and lived in Greece for several years. She worked near the NATO missile firing installation, an extensive missile firing range located at Souda Bay on the island of Crete. Her broadcast experience also includes employment with National Public Radio. Kevin Hale has always been a fan of the paranormal as a kid. He watched, sometimes with the blanket over his head, the Kolchak The Night Stalker series, and was quickly fascinated with the paranormal genre, and he couldn't get enough. He would watch all the cool paranormal documentary shows on cable to get his fix. Then it all came together with The X-Files, his favorite TV show to date. He's been podcasting for 6+ years with over 1,000 podcasts. Peter Robbins is an investigative writer, author, and lecturer whose writing and research are focused on the subject of truly anomalous UFOs and their implications for humanity. He has appeared as a guest on and been consultant to numerous radio shows, television programs, and documentaries. And also, Peter has a new show coming to the platform as well, and that is called Meanwhile Here on Earth with Peter Robbins. That's an excellent logo, Peter. I love that. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Peter, when does your show launch officially on KGRA?
Well, it begins a week from Monday on the 28th of December, and it will be somewhat different in format than any paranormal or UFO excuse me, related show that I'm aware of. I don't want to get into too many of the particulars because I would like everybody listening now to be listening then. I'm waiting for final word on whether or not it will be 6 to 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 8 to 10. But that should be posted on the KGRA web page accordingly, and that is kgradb.com, as everybody will know very soon. And just go to Meanwhile Here on Earth, and you'll get the latest particulars. But week from Monday, we go live.
Yes, and I will add that I discovered the power of the search bar on the website. I don't know if anyone else has played around with it yet, but it is very effective. It's fantastic. It's a great addition and tool to the KGRA website. And I know that in time you'll be able to search guests and past guests as well. Because Peter, I was looking for a banner for your show, and I couldn't find it because the show hadn't launched yet. So I just went to the search bar, and then you popped up. It was that easy. So if anyone hasn't tried that yet, go to kgradb.com, and you can find literally every current and past show, and then access it there. So, Martin, how are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
You call yourself a UFO enthusiast. What does that mean to you?
Well, I never consider myself a researcher. I like to talk to people who, about that are researchers. And, just try to figure out, what's going on. Basically, I said it a number of times in my show. I probably know less about UFOs now than I did 11 years ago. 9 years ago when I started. It's really quite the topic, and it's really interesting to hear, everyone's take on it.
Right. What about you, Tiffany?
Well, my experiences have been amping up over the years, and this year has not let me down at all. I've tried to accept that a lot of people don't believe, they don't want to believe, they want to believe that it's still just science fiction. And I think that it's like an ostrich just putting their head in the sand. At some point, it's going to come out and it's going to kick them in the butt, and they're going to have to accept it. And I think that this year we've had the opportunity to see a lot of different pieces of information come forward. And you know what? We can sit and discuss it, but at some point in the near future, and Kevin and I have discussed this multiple times in the past, over the past year, but it's going to be in our face, and we're not going to be able to deny it any longer. And, they're going to be looking to the people on KGRA and going, why didn't you tell me? Well, we have every week. We tell you what's going on. And, it's not going to be up for discussion anymore. I think that it's just going to be there in the regular news, and kids are going to be learning about it in school.
All right. And Kevin, what about yourself?
I, like Martin, am a fanboy, an enthusiast. I'm not an investigator, researcher, journalist. I've just, been intrigued with the paranormal for years. And, we go back to 2016 when Tiffany and I were doing a little one-off. It was under a different name, the KT Unearthly show. And, we were talking paranormal and enjoying ourselves, and due to some scheduling stuff and some personal stuff, we ended the show in 2016. And I have to admit, I was one leg in, one leg out off the UFO bandwagon. As much as important as Roswell, Rendlesham, the Phoenix Lights, all these, great landmark UFO stories, you can only tell them so much. And it was, to me, and I say this with all due respect, it was just kind of the same story. And then 2017, December 2017, the New York Times, I got all back in, and I've been in on this ride ever since. And You know, my three questions, and I think a lot of people may ask the same questions. Is there a God? What happens when we die? And are we alone in the universe? In my heart of hearts, I think we're going to get the true answer to the alone in the universe question in our lifetime, sooner than later.
In our lifetime. Do you have any years prediction?
You know, I'll put it this way. I'm not going to live to be 100. I've accepted that. Therefore, I'm past the halfway point, if that is the number. So I need it to happen sooner than later, you know.
Yeah, and I get your point, too, about you kind of rehatching the landmark cases. But I think there's an argument also to be made. I remember I was speaking with Kevin Randall, and he was saying how his book on the Socorro incident, people were just saying, well, why are you writing another book on this? You know, what's new? What's there? But here's the thing. And I mentioned this to James Fox, too, in regard to documentaries. I picked up that book just because. And I reignited my interest in the Socorro, New Mexico case. So had he not written that book and just, you know, updated a little bit here and there and maybe didn't exactly totally progress the story and introduce undiscovered facts, he did sort of reignite the interest. And there are always new people coming into this field. So if it's a well-written and responsible book or documentary, I think it's a good thing. The more material that's out there in that regard, if well done, only helps to serve the public, to inform them responsibly. And I see Lee Speigel has just joined us, so we're going to bring Lee on. Lee, how are you?
Hey, Lee.
Lee, you have to unmute your mic. I'll see if I can do it from my end here. There we go. All right. I think we should hear you now. Lee, can you hear us? All right. Bill, you may want to reach out to Lee. We can see him, but we cannot hear him. So let's put Lee on standby for the moment until
it automatically, when you come in like this, it automatically mutes the mic. So he should be able to unmute it.
Lee, try unmuting your mic now. No, I still can't hear. Do you have a plug-in microphone, or can you use the built-in?
Live.
Okay, I'm going to have Bill. Can you please reach out to Lee? Give him a call and see if you can help him out.
He's swearing, but we can't hear him. Yeah.
Yeah, Lee, you look great, but we can't hear you.
He could hold up signs like the people in Lizette's video did.
What's that, Peter?
He could hold up signs like the people in Lizette's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was very moving, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. It really got to me. It pulled my heart.
Yeah. Finally, Lee will do something that would move me. You know, finally.
Lee, you can't defend yourself right now. I'm sorry.
That's not fair. That's true.
Yeah. All right. So of this past year, there has been a lot going on, as we mentioned. And I wanted to read this quote to you all because it kind of exemplified, I think, the unfortunate side of journalism. And, I'm glad that Lee's here tonight. Hopefully we'll get him on so he can speak to this. I was reading an article in Slate.com in regard to the Israeli space chief. And this journalist, in response to the story of the alleged Galactic Federation and a presence on Mars of humans and extraterrestrials, this reporter said, "As a respected human journalist, I think I speak for our entire species of only recently sentient bipeds when I say, quote, that's ridiculous. Haim Eshed's carbon-based neurological organ is simply malfunctioning as he nears the end of his pitifully short biological life cycle, and there is absolutely no reason to look into his story any further." Peter, how do you feel about that?
That's harsh. At the same time, I was not bowled over by this account. The gentleman has terrific credentials, but people, especially as they move on, get into retirement, they have passionate personal views, some of them highly colorful, based on, for me, what it all comes down to is if you feel that way, you can say, It is my belief based upon what I have seen. It is my strong feeling. I'm inclined to take the point of view that this is the way it is, as opposed to just saying this is, without, of course, any way to verify it. It may sound like it's splitting hairs, but it's not to me. I drive people crazy occasionally in my investigative life by being very careful about saying, this is what I know I can know for a fact and can prove in a court of law. This is what I believe is the truth and could prove if I had evidence. This is what I suspect. This is what I fear. And, parse it. Allegorically, I'm from Missouri. Show me something. And the fact that you are a credentialed person, that's great. But this may simply be your passionate belief as opposed to what is.
Lee, how do you feel about that quote?
Well, testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me first?
Perfect.
I did a monologue, or an editorial last week on my show about this, because it seems like people are forgetting what a coincidence that this man, the former Israeli Minister of Defense, he's a retired general, he's a well-known professor, and yet nobody's been comparing him to a man named Paul Hellyer.
Yeah,
who have you? Yeah, okay. About 8 or 9 years ago, he's a man who was also the former defense minister of Canada. He single-handedly brought together all of the armed forces of Canada into one organization. And he was very well known, very, very well liked, very credible man. And then all of a sudden, he started talking about things like, not only are there extraterrestrials, but my sources tell me that there are at least 80 different groups of aliens walking among us right now that, in fact, you couldn't really tell one if you happened to walk past them. Well, that might be true in Times Square or on the Las Vegas Strip. I'll give you that, because everybody's an alien, every other person. But why are we not comparing these two individuals, two former ministers of defense, one from Israel, one from Canada, both practically saying the same thing? And why is it that the media is basically saying this guy is getting on in years, and so he must be a raving lunatic? Why? Why is that ridicule attitude the first one that people pounce on? I don't get that.
I just want to jump in for one moment to say, I guess it's about 5 or 6 years ago now, I spent a good part of a weekend with Paul Hellyer, charming, smart, interesting, and then corresponded briefly after, compared notes with other people, and with all respect to him, I think the statements he was making were mentored by somebody in the field who he took particularly seriously, who I don't necessarily. But be that as it may, once again, I think whatever classified information he knows about, holds, or held as most significant, that it may have been underscored by somebody who thought it was, on a certain level, cool to be able to hang out with the former Secretary of Defense from Canada. And this is purely my point of view, my opinion. But we're too quick sometimes to believe rather than examine, or weigh the evidence or look for evidence to back up an allegation, even when that allegation comes from a respected source.
Yes, you have to have a healthy dose of skepticism, right? Especially if you're going to be in the public speaking about this. I think, in fact, Peter, you have more of a reason for being that way than I think this other journalist, right? Because that's not their kit and caboodle, right? That's to them. This is a subject they would never normally touch. But it seems to me to be responsible as a journalist, instead of just outright disowning this as having any validity, it seems irresponsible for a journalist, even if it does sound a little bit on the crazier side,
Well,
considering
the
this
other-
past year, and we'll talk about that too.
The other thing, Alan, is in my experience, and as you know, I was really fortunate enough, coming up through the ranks, so to say, to work for a good part of my 35-year friendship with Bud Hopkins, arguably the leading figure and certainly pioneer in scientific UFO abduction-related research. And in that time got to assist in several hundred investigations. And at a certain point, and I got into the work, as you know, because of my sister's first talking to me about her experience when we were kids. And I realized at a certain point in working with Bud and my own investigations, the way that I found myself saying it was, I no longer had the luxury of disbelief. And that's when if you get to that point, that's when you have to really start being careful, because if you feel the phenomena exists, and to quote the Twinings Memo is real, well, you forget the famous line right now, but
the famous line is his memo
visionary.
begins. His memo begins with, "The phenomenon is something that is not fictitious. It's real. It's not imaginary. It's not the product of hallucinations. Blah blah blah. We need to study this."
So
that was 1947.
And more so for, say, an investigator who is an experiencer or an abductee and wants to be taken seriously. If you know, as well as you can know, that what we're talking about is real, you have to be your best skeptic all the time. And with each new investigation, look at it with an eye that says, not, oh my gosh, another amazing UFO case, and jump right in with that as the assumption. But for me, my model is a fictional character, and that's Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, who I just became totally enamored with as a kid. The idea of deductive reasoning, that you methodically go through the evidence beginning with the most mundane, boring, everyday, unexotic, unsexy possibility. And if you look at it from all points and exhaust it and you don't have an answer, then you take one step up to the second most boring possibility. It's not the most exciting way to work. However, you do get to a point where if you've exhausted all the conventional possibilities, that's not only when things get really interesting, but you already know as well as you can that you may really be onto something. So it's so easy in this age of instant gratification, and get right into the hive mind of the internet and take off from there. But there's no substitute for our own common sense, deductive reasoning, and critical thinking.
Yeah,
Guilty till proven innocent.
Yes, and the internet and Twitter in particular makes pronunciations and judgments and conclusions without evidence, often just through emoting rather than evaluating, and that's just unfortunate. That's something that we have to permanently navigate from here on in out. That's not going to change, and so it makes it harder for journalists and investigators to get people to listen and take them seriously. Because I'm guilty as anyone else here on Paranormal Now. We have plenty of specious, theories and speculative conversations. Absolutely. But I think there's a difference in how one presents it. If you present something openly and as alleged, that's one thing. But I think there's also, unfortunately, a fanatical side to this. And I think the reaction to the fanatical side is an article like this. A journalist like this, right? Because it's so hot, it's so dirty for them. They just don't even want to touch it. And so I can understand that. And there's so much more to talk about. We have so many topics to cover. We barely scratched the surface of 2020, but we have to take this break. So we'll be right back. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRADB.com radio. I will see you on the Inverted Upside Down.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, the KGRADB.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith, your most grateful host. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this KGRA host round table. We'll have a circle of special guests, including Lee Speigel, Edge of Reality on KGRA Radio DB, Universal Secrets, Kevin Hale and Tiffany Mac, as well as Martin Willis from podcast UFO, and Peter Robbins, meanwhile, here on Earth. And of course, taking us out of the break was Septembrio. If you want to find out more about Septembrio, go to Septembrio, spelled with a Y.com. And for all the KGRA supporters who want to keep up with the news, all things paranormal and ufology, please sign up for the Telepath newsletter for the best in paranormal news, and we'll keep you updated every week so you don't miss a thing. All right, so we're back with our panel tonight. And, okay, guys, so this is a big year, right? What was the biggest article or biggest news drop for you? And let's start with Kevin.
The music bump right before we came back kind of stole my, or actually is a segue to what I want to say, is that from 1993, once the X-Files debuted, until recently, every UFO story that was told on mainstream media had the X-Files theme music in the background, which kind of like, the whole tongue-in-cheek. It wasn't taken seriously. New York Times, 2017, the article comes out, and things start snowballing. Now, the stories, what I take away from 2020 is that, the Tucker Carlsons and CNN, all these people who are bringing on these, the who's who of the paranormal ufology world to talk about UFOs, they're not playing the X-Files music in the background. It's being taken a little more seriously. Last year, my man Joe Rogan, his podcast, he had Bob Lazar. This year, Commander Fravor. Recently, James Fox and Jacques Vallée. It's not as funny or as taboo or nerdy to talk about UFOs or aliens or this unknown technology. That's what I got the most out of this year, is that it's a little more serious. And
I've also noticed Jacques Vallée seems to be making more appearances, involved in more just media in general.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that has to do with, the ATIP release in 2017, starting there, maybe he just decided, it's time for me to come out and speak more on the subject, because he knows that he has weight and authority, and he can keep this narrative moving in a more legitimized direction. Tiffany, what about yourself?
I don't know. It seems like each week I get a little bit, it's like just the tip of some information, and it always makes me just sort of scratch my head. When I started doing the podcasting with KGRA, I was with Fate Magazine Radio, and I really didn't have any guidance other than having worked for, I don't know, the DoD, but it was not based on anything other than my own interest in the paranormal. Like Kevin said, I have this reason for believing that the military and our governments are involved. There is a cover-up. And as the years go by, we do see more and more people coming forward who have such high ranking positions and they're held to such a high standard that most of these people, they don't want to give their careers some kind of dirty, rancid image by coming out with claims to UFOs being real. There's got to be some evidence, and with people willing to put their names and their careers on the line, more today than I've ever seen before, it really helps validate everything that I've been interested in. Now, I don't have some beautiful career in writing or journalism, but I do think that, like I said, every day I learn something new, and every day gives me a little bit more focus and faith that the experiences that I've had personally are real, and there's more people out there who experience them, and it just gives you a little bit more validation. So that's why I'm here. I'm following in Kevin's footsteps.
Yeah, I think we all want to be legitimized, right?
Yeah, not just like Kevin.
Yeah. And whenever you're pursuing high strangeness, every little bit of support you can get from facts, evidence, and authority, that it does help. Lee, you are a force in that regard because of your years working at the Huffington Post and writing your articles. Do you think that you've helped legitimize the subject over the years?
Yes. And that's always been what I wanted to do. Every single thing that I've ever written or done as a project since 1975 has always had the word credibility attached to it. And that was always my intention. And Alan, first of all, Alan, thank you for inviting me to be on the panel here tonight.
Thank you. Sure.
Much appreciated. I had this vision that a round table would be like something from Camelot, where we would have an actual circular table, and there'd be different suits of armor sitting in different chairs, and you could digitize our heads on top of those pieces of armor. Now, there's your show. There's your panel.
That's a brilliant idea.
Swords.
Okay, let's come back next week and do it like that.
Can we do it? Can we do it with lightsabers?
Oh, sure.
Can we do like a Monty Python type theme?
Totally.
Oh, I'm there.
At this point, anything's on the table.
Did I bring a shrubbery?
So, Alan, kind of to answer your question from before, yes, before there was a documentary called The Phenomenon, there had been about 4 years that James Fox had put into this movie, even before it was called The Phenomenon. It went through a couple of different title changes. And he brought me onto the team in 2017 when my 7 years at Huffington Post were over. And so I spent the last 3 years working with James. I was one of the co-producers and co-writers of this. And the very first thing that I told him that I wanted to do was to bring Jacques Vallée into the picture. Because at that point, Jacques didn't really want to have much to do with the UFO community. because of so many years of people, places, authority not taking him seriously. And people just don't have any idea of his background and what he's done for science and the UFO subject. And he wasn't doing very many interviews at all. Right. And he finally gave in. He didn't want to be on camera in this movie. And he changed his mind and I'm not just trying to tease you about this, but when I told him who our initial benefactors were, who financed this movie, and we're not revealing that just yet, but when he heard who that was, he said, oh yes, I'm in. What can I do for you? And I said, well, and James and I met with him, and we said, well, the first thing we want you to do, really, Jacques, is will you become our science advisor and our script advisor to make sure that we don't screw this up, right, and that everything that we do in this 100-minute movie is going to reek of credibility and wow moments, especially for debunkers who just debunk their way into a hopper about anything to do with UFOs. And he said, yes. And we have a contract with Jacques to be our technical advisor on the film. And he wanted to do that. And then as we started moving into it, to the production, he finally said, there's so much more about the material that I've gathered over the decades. I have more to say, and I would like you to film me. So we thought, well, this is great. And James and I worked it out so that we did our first interview with Jacques in San Francisco, where Jacques lives, and it's not far from where James lives in Northern California. And so we did initially a 2-hour interview with Jacques. And then he said, oh, I want to do more. And we then did other interviews with him in other places.
That's amazing.
He's sprinkled throughout the presentation. And the things that he has to say and talk about are amazing. Now, talk about wow moments. I don't know how many of you may have seen or heard Jacques and James Fox on the Joe Rogan show recently. And one of the things that they really got into are these things called meta materials. And that's been in the news a lot. Even in the 2017 New York Times piece, they started hinting at that there are places, there are laboratories, there are scientists who are analyzing and investigating alleged fragments from UFOs, from cases going back to the 1940s, from all around the world. And Jacques Vallée has been one of the people spearheading these investigations and collector of this material. And Jacques is working with some scientists at a laboratory in Silicon Valley, and they've created a new technology that is able to basically take a very small fragment of something, put it under what looks like, in fact, the thing looks like a reflector telescope looking up at the heavens, but that's not where it's looking. It's looking down, and it can take pictures and photographs of something at the subatomic level.
All of this was teased in the documentary.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And we show the actual machine that does this. And we did a lot of behind the scenes pictures of all of us. And before we did the interview with Jacques and with the scientists there, who created this incredible piece of equipment, we were in a ready room in another part of the lab, and we were sitting around a round table, and Jacques and James were discussing what Jacques was going to talk about, the questions that James was going to ask him. And on the table, there were these 3 canisters, all about maybe 7-8 inches tall, circular canisters, and each one had a separate compartment. And in each compartment was a piece of something. And each compartment had the name of the place: Bogota, Colombia, Ubatuba, places where these fragments came from. And Jacques wanted to show these canisters on film, and he basically says, we know from our early analysis that these pieces have been manufactured. We don't know who the manufacturers are, but we know that they're manufactured for some purpose, and we don't know how to manufacture this, and we want to know how. And so there's a picture of us sitting in that ready room, and Jacques and James are talking. Two of the canisters are on the table, and you can see me sitting at the table, and I'm looking up at the camera going, are you kidding me? And I'm holding one of these canisters. It's like right here. It's like, I can't believe what I'm holding. I can't believe the story behind each one of these pieces. That, I mean, is it possible that every single piece that's been gathered from every single story from around the world, are they all lies? Are they all hoaxes? Are they all crashed balloons or weather things? I mean, every single time a story comes out like this and the debunkers pounce, every single time, it's like, this is what they do. This is their life. I can almost imagine now a meeting of the debunkers of the world getting together and saying to each other, look, the last few years, a lot of crap has come out. I was going to say another word, but a lot of stuff has come out in the news, and it's getting tougher and tougher for us to shrug it all under the rug. What are we going to do about this? Because not every story can be explained, and certainly the stuff that they show in a film called The Phenomenon, they're showing stuff that came from the 1940s when nobody on Earth had this kind of technology. And we can't continue to debunk this stuff because now the onus, the responsibility is on the debunkers, I say. They've got to come up with an explanation for every single case they think we, the believers, should be explaining. It's time to turn that around. The debunkers have had their day, I think, and it all has to turn around. There has to be someone who will begin to say, yeah, okay, there's a lot of stuff out there that we don't understand. The only UFO cases that we're interested in, by the way, it's about 95% of every UFO report can be explained by something, conventional things, aircraft, weather balloons, the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn over the next couple of days. The people are now calling the new Christmas star. You know, everything can be explained for UFOs. I'm only interested in the 5% that can't. And it was that almost 5%. The original title of the movie was not The Phenomenon. It was The 701. Do you guys know where the 701 comes from?
Yeah.
701 was the number of unexplained cases that the Air Force's Project Blue Book had left over that, according to them, were completely unexplained. 701 cases. Now, that's a lot of cases to sweep it under the rug and hope that it'll just go away. But it hasn't gone away. And so Jacques Vallée, if I was a guy who would wear a hat, I would be tipping my hat to him every day for the work that he's done and continues to do. He has a new book out, coming out in a few months called Best Kept Secret. Can't wait to read this and get him on the air again.
Yeah, Martin, you might know. How many cases did the Project Blue Book actually cover? Was it something like 13,000 in total?
I never, Lee, you probably know more about that.
It was like between 12 and 13,000. Yeah. It was a lot.
701 of those are investigative worthy. That's awesome. So, yeah. Lee, I mean, the three of you, I imagine the three of you together chatting seriously about this subject. But what do you really say over a round of drinks?
I'll have another. You said what, Jacques? I'll have another, please. You don't want to go on camera and say that? I'll have another, please.
Okay. So, yeah. if you don't mind my asking, and because I know you can't reveal, but these benefactors, are they benevolent?
Yes. All that I will say, and I'm not sure when they want to be revealed for who they are, mm-hmm. I will say that who they are is a name that is well known throughout the world. That much I can say, and I don't really want to go much further than that because of the relationship that we have with them.
Sure.
But without them, we couldn't have got the project really off the ground the way it did, and even beyond the funding that we got from them, James at one point was running out of money, and he clearly talks about this. He had to get other money, other financing from people to finish the project. Yeah. I mean, it was an amazing thing. I don't know how much of his original hair he still has left, on his head from just pulling stuff out. I mean,
he's been at this for years.
Oh yeah,
and he doesn't just spit out documentaries left and right to make a buck, right? I mean, he's very responsible in his approach.
Yes, and this was really the first time that he did a documentary where he really wanted complete control over what was going to go into it, who he was going to talk to. We've had people that are pretty pissed off at us because we haven't put them into the movie, even though they've been interviewed for the movie. A lot of stuff was left on the cutting room floor because of timing. We literally had 100 minutes to deal with, 1 hour and 40 minutes. And I mean, we just like 2 years ago, we discovered James's sister, Kelly, who did a lot of work uncovering archival material for the movie, pictures, films, photographs, documents, old documents. And one day she called James and said, I've just been going through the CBS archives, and they have something in there that's simply titled Secret UFO Meeting. Is that something you might want for the film? And James said, well, I don't know. Send me a few clips of it. Let me see what the secret UFO meeting is. And she did. And the same day he called me in New York and he said, Lee, what have you been searching for 40 years that you haven't been able to find? And I said, well, I am very happily married. So let's move on from there. Let me see. What else could I possibly have wanted? And then I said, no, don't tease me. You know what I've been looking for 40 years. 40 years prior to that, I produced the only UFO presentation at the United Nations, in which I brought in speakers like J. Allen Hynek, Jacques Vallée, Gordon Cooper, Stan Friedman. And that I went through so much behind-the-scenes stuff. And I was supposed to have the original filming rights to the entire presentation. It was an hour-and-a-half presentation at the UN. And it turns out that I didn't get the footage that someone apparently had shot in 1978. And then it was lost for 40 years. No one had it. And Kelly Fox said to James, I found this thing called Top Secret Presentation, UFO Presentation. And when he told me it was the presentation, he said, we found it. What you've been looking for 40 years, we've got it. However, it's going to cost us. CBS is willing to let us have all the footage of what you did at the United Nations, but they want to charge us, they want to license it to us at the cost of $90 per second. Do the math. $90 per second for an hour-and-a-half presentation. We didn't have that in the budget.
All right, we're going to have to hold it there. We're going to the break. And when we get back, we'll get Martin and Peter's take on what they thought had the most impact in 2020. And I want to let everyone who's listening tonight, tonight's show was made possible last minute by everyone here tonight. I had to scramble to put a show together because my previously scheduled guest was unfortunately ill, and I had found out last minute. So I reached out to some guests immediately, and I wish I could do a full KGRA host roundtable. I wish we could have all the hosts on here. It would just be too much. So I put the invite out there. Everyone here responded really quick, and I really appreciate your support for the show tonight. Thank you, everyone. All right, this is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRA Radio. We will be right back on the flip side.
On and again, the signs keep on coming, they point to the end, but I hold on so tight. Back and forth.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRAradio.com.
I'm a mess, but I find that scared of being broken. I've been going and I don't wanna be found. Go on and I don't wanna be found. I live for the night.
All right, taking us out of the break was Lizette Xavier. If you want to find out more about Lizette and her music, just go to lizetteXavier.com. All right, thank you, everyone, tonight. Welcome back to this round table. And all right, so William Martin, what was the most impactful news drop of the year for you?
Well, I was thinking about that, and I think a lot of it has to do with the U.S. Navy. If you think about it, back in 2019, they set up a reporting system for the Navy. But, we're talking about 2020, but it kind of started the ball rolling in a lot of way, I kind of like what Kevin said, because I think I agree totally with him about, how much easier it is to talk about this subject now since that December 16th, 2017 article came out in the New York Times. So they released this year, the Pentagon formally released the Navy videos, and which is kind of a big deal. I mean, it doesn't sound like we've known about these videos for a long time and all that,
sure. But
still, just for them to admit it, yes, these are, we don't know what they are. I think that is a real big deal. And then, just in the news recently, Japan's Navy is kind of following suit along the lines of UFO reporting and stuff like that. So I think a lot of it has to do with the military and our government. I could go into, the Congressional Intelligence, Senatorial Intelligence Task Force set up. A lot of things are really looking strong in the UFO world. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I tried to look through this entire year for like a really exciting UFO encounter. I know UFO sightings are up too because of the COVID thing, but I didn't see anything earth-shattering. I don't know if anyone else did, but
I mean, I can't think of it. I know, speaking with Cheryl Costa, and it's funny, she speaks about how when people go out smoking cigarettes, right, that's when they see UFOs, when they're walking their dogs. And there's a lot of that this year. A lot of people outside spending time that they otherwise didn't have, looking at the stars.
Are people still smoking cigarettes?
What's that?
Are people still smoking cigarettes?
Yes, Tiffany. There.
Besides our producer, maybe.
Just threw you under the bus live on KGRA. That's the insider scoop. This is what happens when you put all these people together. Yeah. I quit. I struggled with smoking for years on and off. But I was really mostly a chain smoker from my teenage to mid 20s, and then here and there after that. So it's not easy. It's not easy to quit. So I feel your pain. Right. You're out there and you're struggling. I understand that. Peter, what about yourself?
I think if this had not been the extraordinary, in the worst sense of the word, year that it has been, it would probably go down as one of the most high visibility, legitimate breaking UFO news story years since 1947. Early on, in January, the Navy admitted they had additional UFO footage and briefing slides. Fairly routine on a certain level, but the reason they weren't going to release them was because they could, quote unquote, cause grave damage to national security, which is food for thought. Again, this is not without precedent, but it's an interesting way for me to kind of begin the year. This summer, Florida Senator Marco Rubio made it clear that he wanted, in his role as acting chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, to see this new, just being created, Defense Department, Pentagon Aerial Phenomena Task Force to publicly release reports on what it was learning about the UFO phenomena. The great journalist team of Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal wrote several new pieces for the New York Times. The most provocative of them for me came out in July. The title of the article was No Longer in Shadows, Pentagon's UFO Unit Will Make Some Findings Public. And the line that really jumped out in wiggly red letters, I thought, was that they were to discuss UFO crash retrievals as actual off-world vehicles not made on the Earth. Again, that's been part of the literature since 1947, but not in the New York Times. Now, granted, we've been seeing a tremendous reduction in the ridicule that has snaked its way along with the UFO phenomena from the summer of 1947. A lot of folks credit it to Leslie and Ralph and another Times writer's terrific coverage of the so-called, now called Tic Tac case in December of 2017. But as you know, Alan, several months before that, a fellow New Yorker in Syracuse, Cheryl Costa, I think probably our leading statistician, was interviewed for the Times, and they treated that seriously. Again, maybe over the past 10 years, you can say for a fact that more and more people care less and less what other people think about what they think and are willing to express about the subject. And I'm seeing that more this year between the lines. But I had a question for you guys. In March, when really all of our lives changed dramatically, I had an afternoon where something hit me that is part of, for me, what the real impact of undeniable disclosure is going to be. And I don't necessarily mean it in the pejorative term that it's going to be disclosed. It's either going to leak or they're going to get tired of not showing themselves in a very public way. But at a certain point, and again, we may all live to see it, something's going to happen and it will be undeniable. And it will affect everybody on the planet at the same time. I had my last out-of-town job the weekend of March 14th and 15th. I went down to Knoxville, Tennessee, to give a talk at a one-day conference. It was some local speakers and myself and Nick Pope. And I flew out on Friday, got back on Sunday. Waiting to change planes at the Dulles International Airport on Sunday afternoon, I thought, this is very strange and anxiety-provoking. I'm there for 5 hours and I didn't see anyone for 3 hours on a normally very busy travel day in one of the busiest airports in America. And I'm thinking, I think I maybe made a wrong call here. I flew out on Friday the 13th. I'm flying back on the Ides of March. I should have listened to my sister, the nurse, and maybe canceled this gig. But I got home, and Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoon, I swear I shopped like I was Rommel's quartermaster about to invade Egypt. And the house has been nicely stocked since then. So here's the deal. It's Wednesday, March 13th. It's late afternoon. I come in the house, I close the door, and I think that's it. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know when things are going to change. For the foreseeable future, it is me and my trusty cat. And we are here. And if I wasn't able to leave the house for 3 months, I draw water from the well under my house. I'm out in the boonies here. Farms are around. I can get by. And that afternoon, I started thinking that this whole... the president had declared the national emergency, I think, on the Monday, the 16th. So it's late afternoon. I'm in my house, and I've been thinking about this idea about disclosure decades before it was called that, certainly going back to the late 70s, and what it would be like. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's a part of it I think I'm actually feeling right now for the first time in my life. And what I meant by that, and I'm curious to know if you had any moments or thoughts about this over these past weird months. that we may well come to a time, if it hits the fan, and if it is undeniable, and if it permeates society around the world, we're pretty much, at any given time, everybody in the world is focused on the same subject. And I thought, forget about the Kennedy assassination when I was a little kid. 9/11, I was just a few miles north of that. That affected a lot of people in the world, especially us New Yorkers.
Mm-hmm.
But this is different. And I thought, my God, I'm in a world right now where, where the great majority of people that we're thinking the same thing or variations on it.
Yeah.
And that is going to be an aspect of disclosure. It's one that doesn't usually come up in discussions about disclosure. And it will probably be very profound for those of us who are, I'll use the phrase laughably, comfortable with the subject or studied in it, as well as people who are new to it and who this will be a shock of almost unimaginable proportion. But just that feeling, and again, I was wondering if any of you had any similar thought on that.
Well, based on how people react to QAnon and how they so quickly put faith into a faceless, voiceless voice. I've always said to people, I said, maybe this person has some insight, right? Some inside connection. Maybe they're technically savvy, but anyone with those skill sets could go online, post about this thing, make up this whole theory, and then it just catches on, right? And the fact that you don't know who this person is, and you have all these people, credentialed people running for government that believe in this, and there's the anti-Catholic, anti-Jewish sentiment tied in there. Like, for me, it's like, are you kidding me? It really, really upsets me. We entertain out there conspiracy theories on this show all the time, but at some point, you have to draw the line, especially if it hurts or affects people's lives. And so I think that there's that susceptibility there to believe anything outrageous. And so, Peter, if it does start catching on and people start believing that the general public believes that there really is a UFO phenomena occurring off-world, most likely, if that starts becoming the narrative, I think that opens the floodgates to all kinds of zealots and false gurus and prophets, and so I worry about that. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I do.
Let me jump in once more.
Sure.
Life, even if we are serious students of these subjects, and we are, the real world has given us bloody few models to follow through on as constructs for what may happen. I'm not a big science fiction person. A lot of people assume that if you're into UFOs, you read you're science fiction nut. Not true. I've been lucky enough to read some of the greatest pieces of science fiction, and of course, major fan of great science fiction movies. But there was, for me, an amazingly mediocre B miniseries in the 80s that was remade half a dozen years ago, as banal as the first one, but spending a lot more money, called V, as in Victory. And the premise, the aliens come to Earth, they all look like hot supermodels, they're going to help us cure cancer, everything's going to work out
like
great.
this panel.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Kevin, we've got to talk. It's absolutely true. But the conceit of it, the premise, the beginning blew me away. It's as great as anything I have ever read by H.G. Wells or Jules Verne. One morning, everybody in the world wakes up, turns on the news, and the news is, over the 60 biggest cities in the world, 1 mile up, there's a 1 mile across mothership just hanging there. Game over. And then the plot degenerates from there.
Very quickly. But when you have the scene of people peeling off like these.
Yeah. But if that were to be the case, the rumor mill wouldn't really matter much. All you've got to do is look up and, hi,
right,
you know,
well-
I have a comment, and it's sort of personal. I know that everyone has led their path, and you can only walk in your own shoes. But when it comes down to why I decided to get back with Kevin, it wasn't because I thought that we were going to be broadcasting and having thousands and thousands or millions of listeners. It had nothing to do with that. It had more to do with getting back into the world and expressing and sharing the truths that we have. And, you know, trying to find guests for all of us it's very difficult, because you have to weed through all of the the many layers of the onion. You have to peel it all back and try to find somebody who is legit and has some knowledge, or has some background, or has some guidance. And I feel that, you know, with these people that we get to speak to, I feel that it's just time. 2020 was the year that we were all at home. We were able to sit and focus on our families, sit and focus on our truths. And when it comes down to ufology, I never had any intention of getting into the world of ufology. I don't feel like I am a historian. That's for other people to do. That's not my job. But to share the truths that I have, I think is very important. I don't want people to feel like they're alone. There are so many people out there experiencing the phenomenon. There's so many people who, yes, they see lights in the sky and they don't know what they are, but that's not the extent of the phenomenon. There are these cases that we like to roll around in our head and try to find the truth to them. And it's very difficult. That's hard to do, because there's such a lack of evidence. So learning to trust your instincts and learning to trust yourself has been the biggest part of 2020 for me. And I believe that we each have our own separate role, and sharing my truth about beings. I don't have an answer as to how many beings are out there, how many different species. I was never given the memo when it comes to that, but I will, you know, I would love to discuss, you know, the things that have happened with you, the things that have happened to your neighbor, your mother, your grandmother, you know, whether it's a telepathic message, or whether or not it was a visitation or an abduction. And with Kevin and I really do feel like our history has had a lack of communal terminology. We are struggling to find the right words to use across the board. You know, terminology, words are so important right now, and being able to describe each situation, it's going to come to each person uniquely. The words are not going to be the same. And so I feel like I'm constantly trying to translate, you know.
Well, Tiffany, when you say words, what kind of words? Like UAP, UFO, or something else?
The acronyms.
Well, not even that. Even though, yes, I'm talking about what people call and how people describe situations, beings, visitations. There's just so many words that get us all caught up. UAP, UFO, USO, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, those are just the basics. But beyond
isn't that the fault of... I'm sorry, go ahead, Tiff.
No, you're fine.
Isn't that the fault of academia, though? Because of their non-involvement.
There is no education.
Right. So we're all come up with our own theories and descriptions and words. So it's, in a sense, it is kind of a free-for-all. You're right.
Right.
And it's that lessens the strength of the community, or the message.
Right. Yes,
and
absolutely.
Lee, I want to ask you about this, because I forgot to ask James when he was on. And, you know, I've had abduction experiencers on the show. And, you know, several of them seem very legit to me and very sincere.
They are.
And particularly Travis, right? I mean, that's the best cases. Why wasn't that covered in the documentary?
Because we had 100 minutes to work with. And in that 100 minutes, we basically wanted to give essentially UFO History 101, going back to the 1940s and chronologically moving forward. And yet there are two places in the film where we begin to touch upon something called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And they both involve schools, one in Australia and one in Zimbabwe. And both involve craft coming down, witnessed by many school children, in some cases with adults, teachers. And we get to that, and we save one of them to the very end of the movie, the one in Zimbabwe. And that's how we actually end the movie, as if to say to the audience, okay, we're not trying to ridicule all of you who have been claiming these encounters, but we didn't have enough time to do it in this movie. But now it's time to move on.
Do all of those people, do they still hold true to the fact that they saw these craft?
Yes.
And these,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. James was in both cases, in the Australian and the Zimbabwe case, he brought back the now adults of those cases and had them recount all together in a group of what they remembered, and they stuck to their guns.
That's hard to do.
Well, it's hard to do, and they didn't change their stories at all.
Right. Think about all of the years of persecution that they had. All the years of being told that they were liars, or they were manipulated, or
not being able to tell,
or fantastical imagination,
staying in the dark.
But see, that's
not all of them.
That's food for the debunkers. This is the Stan Friedman, the late nuclear physicist. He used to always use the same mantra. He would say debunkers have the same mantra when it comes to UFOs. And that mantra is, don't bother me with the facts. My mind is already made up. He never failed to say that to every audience that he spoke to. And my attitude over the years, over the decades now, has changed a little bit about what I believe and what I think is really important about what's going on. And I like to keep it really simple. And I don't think there's going to be disclosure in the way that people expect there to be disclosure, because to me, there already has been disclosure for over 70 years. This is nothing new. We've been given lots of information, and it's been spoon-fed to us from different plates. But it's how the public reacts to it, and it's who's giving out the information. People forget. It doesn't matter who's behind the phenomenon. I like to refer to them as visitors, but I don't care if they come from Alpha Centauri or the center of the Earth or under the oceans. I don't care. All that I do care about is that there's enough evidence, all sorts of evidence, to show something's going on, and has been for a very long time, and involves a technology of some sort that no country on earth has ever had. And let's keep it to those kinds of focuses. Like, what is going on? Who's behind it? I used to get into an argument with Jacques Vallée, and he would always talk about how, well, there's possibly like an intelligent projector out there that's putting ideas into people's minds when they have these encounters. And I would say to Jacques, yeah, but who's running the projector? That's all I care about.
Right. Yeah.
I don't care about where they come from. Who are they, and why are they here? And let's keep it to another level of simplicity. Why would they just show up all around the earth, above every major city? What would be the point? They don't need to do that. That would be like, what, to our benefit? They don't have to show themselves in order for us to know that they are here.
And that also requires our assuming we know what their agenda is.
We have no idea what their agenda is.
We have no idea.
Part of what we're trying to get across in the phenomenon is that, yes, we are presenting people in the military and in the government from around the world, and we're getting them to say, we didn't have to get them, they just wanted to say, yes, there's something going on, it's very real, but we don't know exactly what it is, what they want, where they come from, and what their agenda is. And we can't go out and tell the world that.
Yeah.
The population of the world doesn't want to hear us say that, because we're supposed to be the protectors of our own planet, but we're not.
But that said, Lee, and in regard to our conversation tonight, I think, this is just my personal belief. I think the most impactful, at least for me, news drop of the year, and it was just a conversation between President Obama,
yes,
and Stephen Colbert.
Absolutely, a couple of weeks ago.
And Stephen knew exactly what to say, and he wasn't afraid
to
back down and just let him get away with it, right? So, he asked him,
well, they were talking about, Obama said there are a lot of things that as a president, when you're trying to find out information about something that's been kept from the public, even you as president can have a hard time getting your people to give you this information. And immediately Colbert picked up on that and he said, well, what about UFOs?
Mm-hmm.
And Obama picked up right on it and he said, yeah. And Colbert said, well, did you ask about UFOs? He said, yes, I did. And what can you tell us about it? And Colbert was trying to get the president to either say something or to use some kind of body language to indicate that, he knows something, but he can't talk about this.
Right. Well, he asked him, and the president said, "Can't tell you," quote. And then Colbert took that as a definitive yes. He said, Colbert, no. Because if there was none, you'd say there was none, right? And that's the right question that no one for all these decades has asked.
I know. I mean, we have a great moment in the film where we show a film from about 8 years ago when former President Bill Clinton was doing a speech in Hong Kong. And when it came time to do a question and answer period, someone from the audience said, can you tell us what you found out about UFOs, Roswell, and Area 51? And Clinton and we've got him on camera saying this, very serious. He says, well, yes, I did look into it, and I wouldn't be the first sitting president whose underlings have kept hidden dark secrets from him. In other words, I didn't necessarily, and most presidents don't have a need to know. All they had to do was to wait me out, to get me out of office until the next guy would come in and just start the whole process again. He said, but I'm almost embarrassed to tell you that I did try and find out. And he was very serious about that.
Hey, Tiffany, I just wanted to tell you I got an anonymous comment in regard to your commentary in the first hour. And it said, please tell Tiffany she had the most impactful statement of the past weeks about other life forms visiting being with us. So I just want to let you know that and that plays
Thank you. I wish you could come into my bedroom at night and come visit and just watch. Maybe you can join the live stream later. I've got 4 cameras hooked up.
Wow.
24 hours a day.
With 70s
My husband is the one in control of the
music
content.
in the background, Tiffany.
Universal Secrets is really expanding.
Yeah, well, the problem is, I have a husband who is also a Bigfoot investigator, and he's been doing this since 2011. And so he has taken it to the next step when it comes to my experiences. Not only will he wake up and we discuss what's going on in the bedroom, and all of my experiences have been conscious and awake. And so he has decided to use all the technology that he uses out in the field in order to try to capture something. And I wish that I could say we've got tons of videos of aliens, but you know what? What I've gotten is orbs. This is the only thing. And so I guess I don't know if I'm an unlucky
Tiffany,
customer.
stop talking. We can use this for the on-demand part of our show.
Oh, okay.
Behind the scenes.
Sorry, boss.
But
yeah, so I think that some people don't remember the impact of the people who are experiencing these issues. It's not just, like I said, it's not just unidentified objects in the sky. There's another element to this, and it's a personal element. And it's not just one community. It's not just one country. It's not one type of person. It's across the board, impacting all of humanity. This year, we have been able to communicate a little bit more freely with each other. The idea of science fiction is that the lines are being blurred into reality now. And we are at the center of getting that information out and letting people know that it is okay to talk about it. And the history of people being totally persecuted, I believe, is coming to an end with this year.
Alan, I've got to just say I'm a fanboy of Lee, Martin, Peter. And Tiffany, know how I feel about you. I got to throw this at you and you too, Alan. If we're being visited from from aliens from another world, the assumption is that their technology is greater. Everything about them is just far superior than us. That's my take. Why are they playing by our rules? If they're here, they've been here. Why are they still in the shadows? What do we have? I mean, is there still some Lee, an agreement that they made back in the day for their technology, and then they get to test people? I've been kind of dumbfounded by the fact that if there is a superior race or being than us, and however many species of aliens are there, why are we in charge? Why are they not just looking at us like, instead of to them, Trump or what, all the major leaders of the world are just ants to them. We're just bees. Why are they not just saying, we're better, we're powerful, here we are? Why are they still in the dark for all this time? Lee, go for it. Please.
One of my favorite documents of all time comes from 1986. No, what am I saying? No, 19. Wow, I'm going back to the 60s. 1968. At the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, the Air Force had a science book called Introductory Space Science. The chapter 23 or 33 was called Unidentified Flying Objects. It was written by Air Force personnel, and it was for the eyes only of Air Force Academy cadets, therefore our future Air Force officers and military officials.
You mean I would have gotten it?
You probably, if you were there in 1968.
I was accepted in 1996.
Oh, no, it was gone by then.
Oh, dang it.
Yeah. So this was 1968, and among the things that this chapter, a very lengthy chapter, in which the Air Force was basically telling the cadets, here's our current thinking on UFOs, flying saucers. And they go into all the stories of ancient texts from around the world where humanity had interaction with something that came out of the sky. And then they bring it all up to date with things like the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case from 1961. But specifically, they get rid of all the possible explanations for UFOs, and then they're left with one final thing. This leaves us with the unpleasant idea of alien visitors to our Earth, and there is some evidence to support that. And they give more supposition and examples of what they're talking about to the cadets. And they finally say, look, why no contact? And they say, why no contact? When you go to a zoo, you don't go there to make contact with the lizards. You go there to look at them, to observe them. You don't assume that they're stupid or not intelligent, but you don't make contact with the lizards or animals. And extraterrestrials might look upon humans the way we look upon many creatures on our own planet.
That's fair.
Nothing more to learn about us from making actual contact with us. So he said, and they said, and we believe that from all the evidence that's available right now, that Earth may be part of a surveillance of 3 or 4 groups of extraterrestrials at different stages of their own development. And a further long study, scientific study, is what we recommend. Now, interesting. This was written in 1968. This was a year before Project Blue Book ended in 1969. And at that point in 69, they revised the UFO chapter. So, Tiffany, you wouldn't have had a chance to see the revised edition because it would have had other things in it. But in the 1968 edition, they have references within the text and at the end for the cadets for further information. Your suggested study. They had 2 or 3 books listed by someone named Jacques Vallée. He was the only scientist at that point that we now know about who the Air Force was telling their cadets in 1968 to pay attention to. And a couple of years ago, I happened to talk about this to Jacques, and I said, so Jacques, what do you think about the fact that you were included in that chapter? And he went, what are you talking about? I don't know what that is. Will you send it to me? And I sent him the chapter. He was floored to know that the Air Force had included him in telling the cadets that we might be getting visited by someone. So we don't know who's being told what. All that we can surmise is that if there has been interaction between humans, they told the cadets, we have been contacted somehow for over 50,000 years by someone from somewhere. But they won't go any further than that. And I don't think we can, because who's in charge here? It's certainly not us, and it's certainly not the leaders of Earth. It's my opinion. There's too much evidence that supports that, I think.
Right, Martin, you're really plugged into this too, and to Tiffany's
Yeah,
point, evidence.
I can't hear you.
I can't hear you, Ellen.
Martin, you're really plugged into this as well. So in regard to Tiffany's comment about evidence too, have you seen any modern day evidence? I mean, we have some video, right? Some old photos. What kind of evidence do you think is out there? And what do you think we can obtain with the technology that we have as amateurs?
I'll address that, but could I follow up on
Sure.
on what Kevin's question is? Because I think it's pretty interesting, and I also think it's pretty interesting that a lot of UFOs have lights. Like they want to see. They're not afraid of showing that they're here. But I've told this story a few times on my show. Back in the 1990s, before I even had an interest, much of a passing interest in the topic, I had an insurance broker at my house, and he was selling me a life insurance policy. And somehow I don't know how it came up, but he said that when he was in Vietnam, he was talking about, being in the Vietnam War and all that. But he said, but I had a real different type of job in Vietnam. He said, I was in a special task force that studied UFOs. There was a lot of activity in Vietnam. So I said, wow, this is really interesting. And then he said, yeah, and they were over nuclear warheads. And he knew all this stuff back in the 1990s. I had never heard of any of this at that time. So I said to him, well, what does the government know? Or what is, you were involved. What does the government know about these things?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, we're a petri dish. That was his phrase. And, like we're being studied, which, I don't know if that is an answer. I've been trying to figure out who this guy is, trying to get him on my show, but I can't track him down. But, Alan, if you would kind of refresh the question.
Sure.
Yeah.
How do we investigate? What tech do we have now to look for proof? And is there any current evidence out there that you think is quite impactful or evident?
Well, I know that's the toughest part of this. It's always something that evades, and it's awful hard to, get technical information on these things. However, within this last year, there are some people. There's UFO data. There's what used to be UFO Talk with Mark D'Antonio, and there's also Chris O'Brien out in the Midwest has also some UFO detectors. Basically, there's a lot of UFO detection now that wasn't around before. So I think that is the goal, is trying to get some scientific data. And I think as technology evolves, like Tiffany talks about what's in her bedroom, trying to catch something, I think that we are going to be able to catch a lot more data. They have look at Ray Stanford back in the 1970s was doing this with $2 million worth of equipment in the desert in New Mexico, and actually caught some things. But right now we have the best technology for that. But it evades us, for the most part.
These odd metals that Lee was speaking of earlier as well. It's easy to believe, I think, that there was a crash in 1947. But if these metal samples are coming from more than one site, how many crashes are we talking about? And how can that possibly be? that these advanced aliens would crash multiple times. I still struggle with that.
Ask that question all
Machinery.
Oh yeah. It's like
innately-
some of these ships are like the alien version of the Edsel. They're just a bad car.
a lemon. Right?
A lemon.
Get the team
here.
the lemon, right? Yeah.
I always think I sort of have a belief that our technology sort of screws them up somehow, sort of
Radar,
crosses path.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just pure accident.
No matter
Well,
how
and
sophisticated.
here's another theory that has been cropping up little by little that I'm starting to pay attention to. How do we know that what we think are nuts and bolts physical craft, in fact, aren't? That maybe they're not put together by someone, with alien hammers and alien needles and rivets. There's some theories out there now claiming that whoever's behind all this, they've utilized from how many hundreds of thousands of years of evolution the power of consciousness.
They may well be part android, so to say, Lee.
Yeah.
It's something I remember discussing with Kathleen Martin some years ago, that intelligent materials combined with, hard metal parts and that kind of thing, that some of the aspects may be manufactured, others may be organically grown, so to say. Again, we're very much in the land of theoretical thinking here.
Yeah.
I wanted to come back with one thought, well, two thoughts actually for Kevin, because it's such a provocative question. Years ago, in going through, we all go through our list of reading that helps us become the people that we are. And I was quite taken aback when my first years, when I realized that Carl Jung had written a book called Flying Saucers, a myth of seen in modern times, whatever the subtitle was. And a good part of the book is this is a projection of the unconscious wishing, new pantheon of gods to save us from ourselves. And they're probably real too, and they come and they go under intelligent control. But he discusses at one point, if I remember correctly, a meeting, and this would have been maybe around the First World War, with a gentleman who had been a tribal leader in his village in Africa, what we might now call a witch doctor or a shaman, and who remembered as a boy, I think going back to the 1870s perhaps, when the British basically came right into their village. And up until that moment, they didn't know there were any creatures on the planet other than other black and white men, women, and children in other villages. And in a split second, everything they ever thought they knew was now open to question. Not only were they white, they were wearing red, they had buttons that were metal, they were carrying these long sticks that if you pointed it, the world exploded and a pig died on the other side of the square. Were they their ghosts of their ancestors? Were they gods? Were they devils? And up until that moment, they had a complex, reasoned, detailed culture with traditions. And Jung's question to this gentleman, older very much at that time, was what happened to you all? What happened to your culture? What happened to the village? And again, it's years since I read this, but I think the response was to the effect of, our dreams died. It just all fell apart. Now, once again, going to the world of science fiction, for some kind of model to wrap our heads around, are they playing by our rules, or are they observing a higher rule out of respect for these interesting, hopefully evolving creatures who are still primarily involved, as they were 7,000 years ago, in clubbing each other to death over where the line is drawn in the dirt? And this is not something of mankind. Guys thought this up, women didn't. And in Star Trek, I only got caught up in the first 2 years. I wish everybody well in every Star Trek that followed, but I'm a fan of those.
I've never seen Star Wars
that I grew up with, and
I love those episodes, and Gene Roddenberry's brilliant mind. He wasn't just a great writer, he was a visionary. He was right up there with the best of them. And one of the basic premises of Star Trek was the Federation has something called the Prime Directive. What the Prime Directive was when you're out there in the cosmos and you land on another planet and there's, what do you know, another bunch of humanoids. Maybe they're a different color, or black on the white or white on the right. And the one thing you never do is show them all your cards. You never let them see or have a sense of how evolved you are. Not because you're not supposed to show off, but because they will be completely overwhelmed. It can break them culturally. It can so dishearten them or just blow their minds. And that, in part, may be what's going on. I think Alan brought up the point before. Disclosure's going on all the time. It's going on every damn day since partly time immemorial, but certainly since the summer of 1947. Except it's not the flying saucer landing on the lawn of the White House or in Red Square or take your pick and take me to your leader. It's happening every day in bedrooms, on roadways, in forests, in cities. And it's not happening geometrically. It's happening arithmetically. When Steve Bassett was first becoming involved in the work that he has done such a brilliant job in disclosure pioneering work, he and I had a long conversation. It was his first conference abroad. It was in Liverpool. And he's saying, you're old enough to remember the Vietnam protests. And I sure was. I was an art student and I was against the war. Different than not respecting the people my age who were in it. But he said, that's the kind of movement I want to create. I said, I don't think it's going to happen. It's going to happen unless they mess around and reveal themselves, or there's some big Daniel Ellsberg or Julian Assange or an information dump that is undeniable. It's going to be 7, 9, 12, 1, 3 people every hour in every corner of the earth, leading toward what I'd call a critical mass in the population. One thought before I shut up is that we, the 6 of us, are a perfect example. If it were to happen, we'd be about as ready, we think, as we could be at this point for an average random sampling of 6 people in the population. But I think the deeper we get into our involvement, and let's face it here, we're all pretty involved. We're on the radio doing this stuff. One of us will be soon. That we forget, we're not thinking about the fact that we represent a very modest part of the regional, national, and world population. And my attitudes toward disclosure have changed markedly since 1970s, when it was power to the people, give us the information, we want it, we need it, we can take it. Well, guess what? Most people are not prepared for this at all. And they're decent, hardworking people trying to raise their kids, hopefully have some health care, all of the normal longings of human beings. I see more and more the role of people like us, not so much to talk to each other and preach to the choir, but to expand our audience and help those people begin to adjust to what may be coming down the pike at us in our lifetime.
So do you think that we're being myopic, that we're being sort of self-centered, and not thinking about all the people who aren't?
I think it's a very natural human thing. We're caught up in a subject that we're passionate about. Mm-hmm. We're all doing our best to communicate it. And you know what, at the same time, and again, it's part of what my show will be about, we're also wanting to live interesting lives and connect with interesting people and be of value. And we have other interests, things that we're passionate about, families, hobbies. For me, film, theater, reading, books, travel, again, meeting interesting people. But we're centered in this work. And again, we can continue to speak among ourselves And at some point, when the prison doors open and we're allowed outside again, and we can go places and stuff, when we can actually see each other again and hang out, give somebody a hug without the fear of death, nice stuff like that.
A brighter time.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I say something about yet another reason why we haven't yet been invited to join this galactic federation of planets?
We don't play well with others.
That's very true.
Wait, Lee, you're not a card-carrying member?
I have talked with scientists who very seriously will say, as we all know, there are places on this planet, in South America, in the Amazon, and in Africa, in the Congo, where there are many pygmy tribes. And these are people who don't have any contact with other people outside their villages. So they don't really know what is going on out there. And scientists have said to me, if you go into one of these places where if a missionary brings you to a village and the leaders of the village welcome you just to say hello, the scientists might say, I would like to meet whoever's the smartest person in your village. And so it's either a witch doctor or someone, because they don't understand the concept of science. So they'll bring maybe the leader of the village himself or herself. And the scientists will say, if you open your knapsack and say, I have a gift for you, and this is something that we want you to have. And he hands this person basically a small computer hard drive and says to the person, please try and make this, try and duplicate this and use it for your own purposes. And that person's going to look at this and say, what the have you just given me? Can we plant it in the ground? I mean, they don't know what it is that another culture is giving them, so they wouldn't have any clue what to do about this. And I think that's a way to relate us to another culture, that even if somebody's only 500 or 1,000 years ahead of us, that gives them a real head start on what we have, or 100,000. It's a head start on what we may eventually get to. Maybe there is warp drive in our future, but we're not there yet.
Or a galactic federation.
Or a galactic federation, yeah.
Well, I mean, Martin, do you think there's validity to that story? Galactic Federation?
Oh, no. I personally, I don't know. I got that far when I was reading it, and then I said, no, I stopped. Really.
I mean, no one can blame you, right, for stopping. Of course, it seems really far-fetched out there, but I'm certainly on the side of believing the possibility that indeed people are having abduction experiences. Mm-hmm. And most people like Tiffany, I take them for their word. Yes, of course, we all know there's charlatans out there, right? But there are a lot of good people who have had very real experiences, and I'm inclined to believe some of those people.
Well, we have to believe some of them, because it's either an extreme mass delusion that reaches all the way across the earth, or there's something going on. Those are the only two options.
Yeah, or like a mass psychosis that has
I'll go with that too. Do they have drugs
never been explained?
Do they have drugs that make it stop? Because maybe I had some of those. Make it
Take
stop.
enough drugs, everything will stop.
Take enough. So we're getting to the bottom here, guys. So we have to transition out. So let's just go around. Start with Kevin. If you want to leave us something, this is the last show for Paranormal Now in 2020. In 2021, we'll be moving to Sunday nights. So Kevin, if you could leave us with your words of either wisdom or your thoughts at the end of the year here.
Thoughts, for starters, this year with COVID, I'll speak for myself. I would never have thought in our lifetime we would experience something this extreme that shut down, basically life as we know it. Are we on the verge of coming out of it? It kind of looks like it with some of these vaccines. But I guess my point in that the fact that we've been part of something that we would have not believed in our lifetime we would have experienced. to me, this goes with the never say never. So anything paranormal related, UFO related, I still, in my heart of hearts, believes that we'll get our answers sooner than later. And I mean, who's to say? I mean, is this if those beings are watching us, have been watching us, are here, they clearly are taking note on how we're handling something to this extreme. Now, does it play into maybe their narrative? Stay tuned.
All right.
We got a Tuesday night show that will help you answer those questions.
That is right. Tiffany, 30 seconds. What can you share?
Well, I honestly, I'm really happy that this year is ending on a positive note. I really didn't know how the end of the year was going to go. I do feel that many people are ready to listen more so than they ever have. And I believe that there's a lot of good voices out there. And along with the charlatans, I'm sorry, I know that there's a lot of bad content. So keep your guard up. And God, I hope I'm here to live through a better year. 2021, please come. Get rid of Lyme disease, Rocky Mountain spotted fever for me. And I don't want COVID either. But if I can survive Rocky Mountain spotted fever and Lyme disease, I'm good. You know, we're good. So I would love to see everybody on the flip side of this year.
Well, the force is definitely with you, Tiffany. So Lee, what about yourself?
It's been a shameful year. It's totally unexpected for everyone. Everyone's been affected. Whether you become infected, we're all affected by it. And it's just been awful one day after another, seeing how the leaders of different countries have responded to this and haven't really come through. But through it all, I believe that we will get on the other side. When it comes to paranormal, UFOs, extraterrestrials, whatever, those things will not go away. The coronavirus will go away, but the other things won't. And I personally will continue working in this area because I have no expertise in the other thing that we're all being affected by. And so I'm putting my bets on the science out there and the scientists who know what they're doing. And as I say at the end of every one of my shows, I just say to people, let's just keep our minds open out there and do it.
And I apologize, Lee. I think you've been overshadowed by Maya here. She wants to wish everybody.
Is that an earthly planet?
One.
What planet does this creature come from?
Oh, she's from an alternate dimension. She's wonderful.
An alternate dimension.
Martin, how about yourself?
I know you have to cut this short. It looks like you do anyway on the clock. I just, it's been a year that I want over. I mentioned that before we even started. And I just want everyone to really try to stay safe. It's raging right now and got to get to the other side of it, the vaccine. And we are going to see a better day. We're going to see better days when we can go back to somewhat normal slowly and then eventually back to normal. It will happen. Just hang in there, everyone, and have great holidays.
All right. Thanks, Martin. Peter?
I don't know if it's ever going to be like it used to be. A lot of people among us in our little worlds, in the worlds of our listeners and viewers, have lost people. It's been the worst year of some people's lives. It's also been a year where we've all had a chance, like it or not, to reflect on our priorities, the work that we do, our families, the nature of mortality, the fact that we are all here for a while and then we move on to the next adventure. So to make this time count, I come out of it thinking back to a wonderful definition of a Zen beginner, knowing that you know nothing and having it be okay. I know more than nothing about UFOs, but after 40-odd years, I'm still awash in a great deal more questions than answers. And you know what? That's not a bad place to be. So join me a week from Monday, and we'll take it from there into my little world.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Thank you, everyone, for joining me tonight. I really do appreciate it. I'm honored that you're with me and jumping in last minute to make this happen. So I really appreciate that. And sending positive vibes, peace and love to all of you out there. Thank you for supporting this show. Thank you for supporting KGRA. It's been a rough year in 2020. We've talked about that. But Tiffany, I feel you. I think that we are ending it on a more positive note, and that encourages me moving into 2021. So we will see all of you in the year 2021. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, and have a Happy New Year. Special thanks to our producer who's working on quitting, Bill Skywatcher. And special thanks to Eric Brager for building that new website. It's absolutely fantastic. Right. And if you want to find out more, go to kgradb.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at paranormal_now. And until next time, everyone, live in the mystery.